There are a lot of false stereotypes in calisthenics, but some of them are based in the truth, especially in certain types of calisthenics that discourage focusing on size and well-rounded aesthetics, as it becomes harder to perform advanced skills. For example, in static training, where excessive muscle mass, and especially leg size, mainly just serves as dead weight. At the pro level, these athletes only care about performance and want to keep their bodies as strong as possible while being as light as possible, which often results in smaller frames and less focus on raw mass. It's not that statics is worse, and there are definitely exceptions, but this training style rewards a high strength to weight ratio. So even though it looks cool, getting 17-inch arms like mine simply isn't gonna be a priority for most of these high-level athletes. And this sometimes leads to the belief that calisthenics just doesn't build muscle very well. But that's where things get interesting. Is it that you can't, or is it simply a matter of choice? And what about all the other training styles in calisthenics, where size actually increases performance? These are important questions to explore and can help clear up confusion about building muscle. An especially debated muscle group, as always, is the arms, which makes sense given their role in building an aesthetic physique. Like, can you really build big arms using your own body weight, or do you need traditional weightlifting? Well, coming from a calisthenics athlete who actually built my arms using calisthenics, the shortened answer is yes. You can, and very effectively at that, but it requires the right approach and exercise selection, which can be difficult to find in the complex and sometimes overwhelming world of calisthenics. So let me share my experience. I'll show you a simple way to build your arms with some of my favorite exercises to do it, and I'll give you this blueprint while still enjoying the core of calisthenics, having fun, improving skills, and getting stronger. The approach here is simple and revolves around 3 complementary exercises. One for triceps, one for biceps, and one for shoulders. I know the shoulders aren't part of the arms in an anatomical sense, but I wanted to include it because they contribute to giving the arms shape. I've selected these 3 exercises to build size and function as skill progressions for the one-arm pull-up, the handstand push-up, and the impossible dip. However, while they are great exercises, it's important to understand their role as complementary tools, designed to sit on top of what should already be the backbone of your trainings: pull-ups and dips. It's virtually impossible to compete with these two when it comes to building raw upper body mass, including the arms. Dips will increase your overall thickness, working the triceps and front delts, while pull-ups engage your biceps, brachialis, and even forearms. That's ridiculously well-rounded for it only being 2 exercises, and it doesn't need to be complicated. A simple approach is often more sustainable and, most importantly, enough. And this is one of the cases where the simple approach is also one of the most effective approaches. That's why most sets and reps athletes who focus on high rep pull-ups and dips have really good arm development, and especially weighted calisthenics athletes specializing in these movements. In this training style, big and aesthetic arms are the default, not the exception. And I specifically find it interesting just how peaky the biceps can get, mainly from pull-ups and variations. So the majority of your volume should come from dips and pull-ups to build overall mass, and then supplemented by a set of exercises to more directly target the arms. And the main takeaway before moving on to these is to keep the basics in rotation even as you get stronger and unlock more advanced skills. If they start feeling too easy, you can always add reps or weight, because mastery doesn't mean leaving the basics, it means doing them better. And with that, we're moving on to the supporting exercises. If you want bigger and stronger arms, naturally the triceps should be your top priority. They make up most of the upper arm and are involved in every pushing movement when generating power and stability. But training the triceps with quality can be difficult in calisthenics, because as you may know, most exercises target multiple muscle groups at once. And unlike some of the options for biceps, the triceps almost always play a secondary or a supporting role, whether it's to the chest like in dips or to the shoulders like in handstand push-ups. So many exercises utilize the triceps, but very few are tricep dominant. This builds well-rounded and functional strength, but it makes it difficult not to compensate with your other muscle groups when specifically wanting to target the triceps, and confusing to find a good exercise and skill selection. There are exercises like tricep extensions, but they're not really progressions towards anything. And if that's the case, some of you may prefer the more scalable options from weightlifting. However, there is one exception to the rule, coming from a very underrated skill, and that's the impossible dip. The impossible dip involves starting from a regular dip position, leaning back to shift your weight onto the triceps, and then lifting your body weight through the triceps with control. It's a cool and very demanding movement, as you can probably guess from the name, and it's to my knowledge the only tricep dominant skill in calisthenics. A while back I wanted to learn the impossible dip, and naturally I needed a way to progress that allowed me to gradually increase the difficulty and the weight on the triceps. This led me to create an unorthodox but very effective and scalable exercise, and it's relevant because in that period I learned the impossible dip, but at the same time my triceps blew up in size, and the reason why was the feet assisted impossible dip. To perform this exercise you first need to find a dip bar and place it lower than usual, at a height around the middle of your thighs, so low that you shouldn't be able to reach the bar when standing straight. Alternatively, if your P-bars have a fixed height, you can place something to elevate your feet instead. Next, slightly bend over, grab the P-bars and take a small step out in front. From here, shift your weight to your legs by bending them into half a squat. Then slightly lean back, just enough to feel some weight transfer onto the triceps. But even with this lean, the majority of your weight should still be on your feet. So if that's not the case, try stepping a little closer to the P-bars. If you're in the correct position, you should already feel some engagement from your triceps and core in order to stabilize. From this starting position, lower your forearms until they hit the P-bar. Ideally, the back of your shoulders should vertically align with the elbows or be behind the elbows throughout this descent. Then, as soon as you've reached the bottom, press with the triceps and compensate with the feet. And since the movement is very demanding, you'll probably need to compensate a significant amount. As you press up, try not to let your shoulders help by crunching over, which they naturally will want to do in order to correct the weak position. If you experience this shoulder crunch a little, it's expected because it takes time to learn the proper technique. Finally, as you re-enter the starting position, squeeze the triceps and repeat for a few controlled repetitions. I would say at least 3 reps, with 5 to 7 being a good sweet spot to get in some volume. And remember that you can gradually increase the amount of assistance as each set progresses to fully burn out the triceps. However, I will say that even with the assistance, this exercise is pretty difficult, and if it's too much, you can start with only negatives or strengthen your triceps through dips, push-ups and extensions first to later return. When targeting the biceps, calisthenics offers a good and deep exercise selection. And the reason is because it's such an important muscle in a variety of movements and skills, like pull-up variations, lever variations, and even planche. Among these skills, the one-arm pull-up stands out as one of the most iconic in calisthenics. And for good reason. It's a true display of relative pulling strength and a benchmark of bodyweight mastery. The problem, however, is the insane load it puts on the arm and ligaments. And if you suddenly start attempting it, it comes with a high risk of injury, especially if you've only been doing regular pull-ups beforehand. That's because the one-arm pull-up has a different movement pattern and elbow position, and it should be treated as its own exercise. So you need to gradually build the specific strength, and you need a progression in between pull-ups and one-arm pull-ups that allows you to do just that. And in comes the arm-assisted one-arm pull-up. It's an adjusted pull-up variation that requires no bands or other equipment, and a great exercise for building both muscle and strength. To perform it, find a pull-up station and grab the bar with one hand in a deep pronated grip, just like you would in a pull-up. This will be your dominant pulling arm, and if you specifically want to target the one-arm chin-up, you can switch to a supinated grip instead. This helps contract the bicep a little more, but the pronated grip is also highly effective and with more carryover to the classic one-arm pull-up. With one hand gripping the bar, you want to position your elbow so that it's pointing directly in front of you. This is different from a regular pull-up, but similar to the mechanics of a one-arm pull-up. From here, reach out wide with your other hand and grab the bar using both the grip and arm position of a normal pull-up. This arm will function as the assistance and compensate for the missing strength when you later initiate the pull. It can be helpful to begin from an elevated surface so you can make these grip and position adjustments before hanging freely. Once you have the proper grip and are now hanging passively, shift your center of mass by leaning towards the dominant pulling arm. Staying close to this arm is a crucial aspect in getting good leverage and something you can start practicing through the exercise. and you'll probably notice quickly that it requires a good amount of core tension to keep up. From this starting position, begin pulling with all you've got from the dominant arm. Try to stay close to this arm throughout the movement while keeping the elbow facing forward. At the same time, compensate with the other hand so that your chin is able to clear the bar. Help just enough that you'll be able to complete at least 3 repetitions, and preferably between 5 to 7, even if that means pulling a significant amount with the supporting arm. And of course, remember to practice both sides. Over time, you can progressively increase the difficulty by reducing the assistance. On the contrary, if this exercise is too difficult even with assistance, then you can focus on the negative part of the movement. And you can also build a stronger base through pull-ups first, so you more naturally can make the transition. I will also say that if you're unsure of the technical aspects of one-arm pull-ups, it may be helpful to watch my quick tutorial before attempting the exercise. Let's end with a shoulder exercise to accentuate the more classical biceps and triceps. When it comes to building the shoulders with calisthenics, few skills are as effective as the handstand push-up. It's a movement that requires but also showcases both strength and body control. And not only does it look amazing, but it's also extremely mobile, as it can be performed basically everywhere, and the process of learning it feels rewarding with fast progress compared to other skills. However, it does depend on a significant amount of shoulder strength, something that must be developed through more scalable progressive exercises first. And these progressions that specifically target the needed strength without the added challenge of balance are excellent for building the shoulders. This is especially true because the handstand is a dynamic strength skill, which, similar to the basics, benefits from a sets and reps style of training. And one of these progressive exercises stands out as particularly effective. That exercise is the elevated pike push-up, and it's one of my personal favorites. In fact, this is, in my opinion, the best strength progression for the handstand push-up, and because of a few reasons. First, and most importantly, it imitates the position of the arms and torso. This is relevant because other progressions use a vertical movement pattern which doesn't have quite the same carryover. The handstand push-up actually involves a lean forward with more of a diagonal body line in order to stabilize. And in some wall-assisted progressions, it's possible to replicate this movement, but when nearing failure, it comes with a higher chance of losing the position and even falling. This leads to the second reason. You can train till failure in a controlled way that reduces the risk of injury, as you can simply step out of the exercise when needed. And third, you can adjust how much weight you shift forward onto the shoulders and how much you help with the feet to scale the difficulty. This can make the exercise as challenging as wall-assisted variations, but also easier depending on the weight distribution. It even allows for a gradual increase in assistance throughout your set. Of course, there are also easier progressions if you're a beginner and not quite ready for the elevation just yet. To perform the exercise, start by elevating your feet and hands. In theory, elevating your feet will be enough, but it can feel awkward and requires a lot of hamstring mobility in the starting position. I find that adding a deficit makes for a more natural starting position, but still allows you to enter the correct movement pattern and bottom position. It feels better, more intuitive, and with a deeper stretch, and just a slight elevation is enough. Parallels or kettlebells work well, but you can easily get creative and find other solutions, like the dumbbells and pavers used here. Place the elevation so your hips are lifted by reducing the distance between your hands and feet. Reduce this distance as much as your mobility allows and adjust the setup accordingly. Next, you want to find the same hand placement that you would in a handstand, which typically is about shoulder width apart. From this starting position, lean forward with tucked elbows and actively feel the stretch on the front delts. Aim to engage your core and fully tighten your upper body on the descent to create a stable base from which you can generate force. This can be difficult in the beginning, but you'll learn to get more efficient as you go. As for the rep range, like in the other variations, I would say at least 3 repetitions, with 5 to 7 being a good sweet spot to get in some volume. But almost anything goes, and doing higher reps is also effective. That was the last exercise out of the 3. If you follow the principles and guidelines, you'll definitely build your arms and strength. I hope you enjoyed the video, hopefully it was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.